The howl of a coyote pierced the darkness as Catherine Turner stood frozen on the wooden porch of her father's general store, her trembling fingers clutching a letter that would shatter what little remained of her reputation in Kennewick, Wyoming territory. The year was 1876, and at 22, Catherine had already endured more whispers and sideways glances than most women twice her age. "Miss Turner," the shrill voice of Mrs. Abernathy cut through the cool evening air. "Is it true what they're saying about you and that traveling salesman who passed through last month?" Catherine's heart hammered against her ribs. The rumors had started 3 days ago when she'd been spotted speaking privately with Mr. Hopkins, the silk merchant who had indeed shown her special attention during his brief stay. Nothing improper had occurred. He'd merely offered her a position managing his shop in Cheyenne, but in Kennewick. A young, unmarried woman speaking alone with a man was enough to set tongues wagging. "I assure you, Mrs. Abernathy, there is nothing to discuss." Catherine straightened her spine, channeling every ounce of dignity her mother had instilled in her before consumption had taken her 5 winters prior. Mrs. Abernathy's thin lips pursed tightly. "Well, I never. Your poor father must be beside himself with worry about your prospects now." As the older woman marched away, Catherine's shoulders slumped. Her father wasn't worried about her prospects, he was dying. The letter in her hand confirmed what Dr. Holloway had told them weeks ago. The cancer was spreading, and her father had mere months left. "Don't let them get to you, Miss Turner." The deep voice startled her. Catherine turned to find Quentin Adams leaning against the hitching post, his hat tipped low over his eyes. The cowboy had arrived in Kennewick 6 months ago, taking work at the Reynolds Ranch outside town. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. Unlike most of the men in Kennewick, he'd always treated Catherine with respect. "Mr. Adams, I didn't see you there." Catherine quickly tucked the letter into her pocket. "A man learns to move quietly when he's spent most of his life around spooked cattle." His smile was warm, genuine in a way that made Catherine's breath catch. "Those old biddies have nothing better to do than spin tales. Pay them no mind. If only it were that simple." Catherine glanced down the street where several women had gathered outside the millinery, their heads bent close together. In a town this size, gossip is as good as gospel. Quentin pushed away from the hitching post, closing the distance between them. "What's really troubling you, Miss Turner?" "I suspect it's more than idle chatter." Perhaps it was the kindness in his eyes, or the fact that she was simply too exhausted to maintain her facade of strength, but Catherine found herself confiding in him. "My father is dying, Mr. Adams. The doctor says he has only months left and I—" Her voice broke. "I have nowhere to go once he's gone," understanding dawned in Quentin's eyes. "And a woman alone in these parts becomes either a target or a charity case." Catherine finished his thought. "The store will be sold to cover my father's debts. Mr. Hopkins offered me a position in Cheyenne, but now that the gossips have twisted that conversation into something sordid, I doubt the offer still stands." Quentin was quiet for a long moment, his gaze thoughtful as he studied her face. "I might have a solution, Miss Turner, though you may find it forward." Catherine raised an eyebrow, waiting. "Marry me." The words hung in the air between them, so unexpected that Catherine was certain she'd misheard. "I beg your pardon." "It's a practical arrangement," Quentin continued, his voice steady. "I've been saving to buy my own ranch. I've got my eye on the old Wilson property, but a man needs a wife to build something lasting out here. You need security and a respectable position. Marriage solves both our problems." "Mr. Adams, we barely know each other," Catherine protested, though something fluttered in her chest at his proposal. "We know enough. I know you're kind to the Miller children when they come in without enough money for candy. I know you can run a business better than most men in this territory. And you know I work hard and treat people fair," he shrugged. "The rest we can learn along the way." Catherine stared at him, searching his face for any sign of mockery or deceit, but found only sincere determination. "People will talk," she said softly. They'll say you married me out of pity or that I trapped you somehow." Quentin's laugh was rich and warm. "Let them talk. Words don't build ranches or homes, Miss Turner. Actions do." "This is madness," Catherine whispered, even as her mind raced with the possibilities. A home of her own. Protection from the vultures already circling as her father's health declined, and perhaps, in time, even affection might grow between them. "Most good things in life start with a little madness," Quentin replied. He took her hand, his touch gentle. "Think on it. I'll come by tomorrow for your answer." As he walked away, Catherine found herself unable to move, her hand still warm from his touch. Marriage to a man she barely knew, it was preposterous. And yet, as she watched Quentin Adams stride down the dusty Main Street, his shoulders straight and his step confident, she couldn't help but wonder if perhaps this madness might be her salvation. The next morning, Catherine woke before dawn, having barely slept. She moved quietly through the small apartment above the general store, preparing breakfast and laying out her father's medications. When she entered his room, she found him already awake, his once robust frame now frighteningly thin against the white bedsheets. "You're fretting, Kitty," James Turner said, using the childhood nickname that always made her smile. "I can hear your thoughts from here." "Just planning the day's inventory," she lied, setting his tray across his lap. Her father's knowing gaze saw straight through her. "That Adams boy came to see me last night after you went to bed." Catherine froze. "He did, asked my permission to marry you." James took a slow sip of tea. "Told me his plans for the Wilson property. Seems he's got a good head on his shoulders." "Father, I'm dying, Catherine." The blunt statement silenced her protests. "We both know it. I've lain awake night after night wondering what will happen to you when I'm gone." Tears stung Catherine's eyes. "I can take care of myself." "You can," James agreed, "but this world doesn't make it easy for a woman alone." He reached for her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Adams seems decent, says he doesn't expect love, just mutual respect and partnership. And you approved this arrangement." I told him it wasn't my decision to make. James smiled weakly. "You're your mother's daughter, stubborn as the day is long, but for what it's worth, I think he'd be good to you." Catherine sat on the edge of the bed, her emotions in turmoil. "The whole town will think I married him to silence the gossip." "And what if they do?" Her father shrugged. "People will always talk, Kitty. The question is whether you'll let their words dictate your life." Before she could respond, the bell above the store's door jangled. It was too early for customers, which meant only one person would be calling Quentin Adams, right on time as promised. "Go on," her father urged. "Whatever you decide, I'm proud of you." Catherine descended the stairs slowly, each step feeling momentous. Quentin stood in the center of the store, hat in hand, looking every inch the capable cowboy in his worn leather vest and denim trousers. When he saw her, something in his expression softened. "Miss Turner," he greeted her, his voice low. "Mr. Adams." She moved behind the counter, kneading the barrier between them. "I understand you spoke with my father last night." "I did." He stepped forward, placing his hat on the counter. "I should have waited for your answer before approaching him. That was presumptuous of me." The apology surprised her. Most men in Kennewick wouldn't have thought twice about discussing her future without her input. "Yes, it was, but I appreciate your respect for propriety." Quentin's mouth quirked into a half-smile. "I've given you a night to consider my proposal. Have you reached a decision?" Catherine studied him carefully. He was handsome, certainly, but it was the steadiness in his gaze that truly drew her. "Before I answer, I need to understand your expectations." "What kind of marriage are you proposing, Mr. Adams?" "A real one," he answered without hesitation. "I'm not offering charity or convenience alone, Miss Turner. I'm offering a partnership. I expect us to work together to build something worthwhile. I'd expect fidelity, honesty, and effort. In return, you'd have my protection, my respect, and my name." "And what of affection?" Catherine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A slight flush colored his cheeks. "I believe affection often follows respect. I won't make demands that you can't meet, but I won't pretend I'm not hoping that in time you might come to care for me as I already find myself caring for you." His candor took her breath away. "You care for me? I've watched you for months," Quentin admitted. "The way you manage this store, care for your father, hold your head high despite the gossips. Yes, Miss Turner, I care for you, more than is probably wise given how little we've spoken before yesterday." Catherine felt heat rise to her own cheeks. "People will say I married you to keep the town's gossip quiet." Quentin leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Let them talk. What matters is what's true between us." In that moment, Catherine made her decision. "Yes," she said simply. Surprise flickered across his face. "Yes. Yes, I will marry you, Mr. Adams." Catherine took a deep breath. "But I have conditions of my own. I want to be involved in all decisions regarding our future. I want to continue working, perhaps not here but somewhere, and I want to care for my father until—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Of course," Quentin nodded solemnly. "Your father will have the best room in our home for as long as he needs it. As for working, I'd welcome your help with the ranch books and decisions," he smiled. "Miss Turner, I wouldn't have it any other way." "Then we have an agreement." Catherine extended her hand across the counter, intending a handshake to seal their arrangement. Instead, Quentin took her hand and raised it to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "We have much more than an agreement, Catherine. We have a beginning." The touch of his lips sent a shiver down her spine, and for the first time since her father's diagnosis, Catherine felt something like hope bloom in her chest. The wedding took place 3 days later in the small white church on the edge of Kennewick. Reverend Maxwell kept the ceremony brief, mindful of James Turner's failing health. The old man sat in the front pew, his pride evident despite his pallor. Catherine wore her mother's wedding dress, hastily altered by Mrs. Peterson, the kindly widow who lived next door. The simple white gown with its delicate lace collar was outdated by nearly 20 years, but when Quentin saw her walking down the aisle, the look in his eyes made her feel like the most beautiful woman in Wyoming territory. "You take my breath away," he whispered as she reached his side. The church was surprisingly full. It seemed the entire town had turned out, though Catherine suspected it was more from curiosity than genuine well-wishing. She could hear the murmurs, see the knowing glances exchanged. Awfully convenient timing, wouldn't you say, Mrs. Abernathy's stage whisper carried to the altar. "I give it 6 months before he realizes what he's saddled himself with," came Mr. Henderson's gruff response. Catherine's cheeks burned with humiliation, but Quentin's hand found hers, his grip firm and reassuring. "Look at me," he said softly. "Only at me." She raised her eyes to his, finding such certainty there that the whispers faded to insignificance. When they exchanged their vows, Catherine's voice was clear and unwavering. Whatever had brought them to this moment, practicality, desperation, or perhaps something deeper that neither had yet acknowledged, she was committed to honoring her promise. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Maxwell declared. "You may kiss your bride." Quentin hesitated, his eyes questioning. They hadn't discussed this part, and Catherine realized he was giving her the choice. Touched by his consideration, she gave a slight nod. His kiss was gentle, respectful, but even so, Catherine felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with embarrassment. When they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Adams, she held her head high, meeting the gazes of the townspeople with newfound confidence. The reception was held at the hotel dining room, a modest affair organized by the church ladies. Catherine was placing a piece of cake on her father's plate when Mrs. Abernathy approached, her smile as false as her congratulations. "Such a lovely ceremony, my dear, though rather hasty. One wonders what the rush might be." The woman's gaze dropped pointedly to Catherine's midsection. Before Catherine could respond, Quentin appeared at her side. "The rush, Mrs. Abernathy, was that I couldn't bear to wait another day to call this remarkable woman my wife." His arm slid around Catherine's waist, protective but not possessive. "Now, if you'll excuse us, I believe my father-in-law requires our attention." As they walked away, Catherine whispered, "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Quentin replied. "We're partners now, your battles are mine." The simple declaration warmed her more than any passionate avowal could have. Later that evening, they departed for the Wilson property, which Quentin had officially purchased that morning. James Turner traveled with them in the wagon, made comfortable with blankets and pillows. The three-room cabin that would be their home was modest but solidly built. Quentin had spent the past days preparing it, a fact that touched Catherine deeply. "It's not much," he said as he carried her across the threshold, honoring tradition despite the unorthodox nature of their union. "But we'll make it better together." "It's perfect," Catherine replied, and was surprised to realize she meant it. She and Quentin settled her father into the small bedroom they had prepared for him, then stood awkwardly in the main room as night fell. The question of sleeping arrangements loomed large between them. "I've made up a bed for myself in the barn," Quentin said finally. That is, I don't expect." Relief and an unexpected twinge of disappointment mingled in Catherine's chest. "Thank you for understanding." Quentin nodded, his expression unreadable in the lamplight. "Good night, Mrs. Adams." The name startled her. Mrs. Adams. She was someone new now, someone with a future that had seemed impossible just days ago. "Good night, Mr. Adams," she replied softly, "and thank you for everything." After he left, Catherine sat alone by the fire, wondering what kind of marriage they would build from this strange beginning. Outside, an owl called into the darkness, and for the first time in months, the sound didn't feel like an omen. It felt like a greeting. The first weeks of marriage brought a rhythm to Catherine's life that she hadn't expected. Each morning, she rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for Quentin and her father. Quentin would work the land from sunrise to sunset, determined to have at least 20 acres ready for cattle before winter set in. Catherine divided her time between caring for her father, keeping the cabin, and helping Quentin where she could. They were cordial with each other, even friendly, but maintained a careful distance. Quentin continued to sleep in the barn, coming to the cabin only for meals and occasionally in the evenings to sit by the fire while Catherine read aloud from one of her books. One afternoon, a month after their wedding, Catherine was hanging laundry when she heard the sound of approaching horses. She shaded her eyes against the sun to see Sheriff Donovan and his deputy riding toward the cabin. "Mrs. Adams," the sheriff called, tipping his hat as he dismounted. "Hope we're not intruding." "Not at all," Catherine replied, though her stomach knotted with apprehension. "What brings you out this way, Sheriff?" "Just checking in. Town's been talking about the quick wedding and with your father's condition." He cleared his throat awkwardly. "Wanted to make sure everything's as it should be." Catherine understood immediately. They thought she might have been forced into the marriage or that Quentin had somehow taken advantage of her family's vulnerable position. "Everything is fine, Sheriff," she said firmly. "My husband is working the north field if you'd like to speak with him." "That won't be necessary, madam, just doing my duty." The sheriff's eyes softened. "Your father doing all right, as well as can be expected." Catherine gestured toward the cabin. "Would you like to see him?" "I know he'd appreciate the company." While the sheriff visited with James, the deputy, a young man named Thomas, lingered by the clothesline. "Folks in town still talking?" Catherine asked, pinning one of Quentin's shirts to the line. Thomas looked embarrassed. "Some, Mrs. Abernathy's been suggesting that your husband might have, compromised you, forcing your hand." Catherine's hands stilled. "And you believed her enough to ride all the way out here?" "No, madam," Thomas said quickly, "but the sheriff thought we should check just the same." The implication that her reputation or lack thereof had prompted an official visit stung deeply. Catherine was about to respond when she heard Quentin's voice behind her. "Afternoon, deputy. Something I can help you with." Quentin stood a few feet away, his expression calm but his stance protective. He'd clearly ridden back from the field when he'd spotted the sheriff's horses. "Just a friendly visit," Thomas said, suddenly nervous. "Is that right?" Quentin moved to stand beside Catherine, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. And does the sheriff make friendly visits to all the newly married couples in the county? Before Thomas could respond, Sheriff Donovan emerged from the cabin. Adams, he acknowledged with a nod. Got a fine property here. Thank you, Sheriff. Quentin's voice was polite but cool. Any particular reason for your visit today? The sheriff had the grace to look uncomfortable. Just checking in. Mrs. Abernathy and some others expressed concerns about the hasty nature of your marriage. I see. Quentin's jaw tightened. And you felt these concerns warranted an official response. It's my job to ensure the well-being of everyone in the county, Sheriff Donovan said defensively. Then consider your job done. Quentin placed his hand at the small of Catherine's back, a gesture that was both comforting and unmistakably possessive. My wife is well, as you can see for yourself. Our marriage may have been quick, but it was entered into freely by both parties. The sheriff studied them for a moment, then nodded. That's good enough for me. Sorry to have troubled you, Mrs. Adams. After they had ridden away, Catherine turned to Quentin. You didn't have to come back from the field. Yes, I did. His expression was grim. The gossip is worse than I thought if it's reached the sheriff's ears. They think you compromised me, Catherine said flatly. Quentin ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. Let them think what they want. We know the truth. Do we? The question escaped before Catherine could stop it. What is the truth of us, Quentin? We live together but separately. We're married but not truly husband and wife. What are we doing? Something flickered in his eyes, hurt perhaps, or longing. We're building a life, Catherine. One day at a time. A life, she echoed. But what kind? Before he could answer, they heard James calling from inside. The moment broke, and Catherine hurried to attend to her father, leaving Quentin standing alone by the clothesline, his expression troubled. That night, after her father had fallen asleep, Catherine sat by the fire mending one of Quentin's shirts. The cabin door opened, and Quentin entered, his expression unreadable. Instead of taking his usual chair, he knelt before her, taking the sewing from her hands and setting it aside. I've been thinking about what you said earlier, he began, his voice low. About what kind of life we're building. Catherine's heart quickened, and I realized I've been a coward. Quentin took her hands in his. I've kept my distance because I was afraid of pushing you too fast, of making you regret our arrangement. But in doing so, I've left you uncertain of your place, of my feelings. Quentin, please, let me finish. He squeezed her hands gently. When I proposed this marriage, it wasn't just out of practicality or kindness. I spoke truly when I said I cared for you. What I didn't say was how much. Catherine could barely breathe as he continued. I've watched you for months, admiring your strength, your kindness, your determination. I wanted to court you properly, but then your father fell ill and the gossip started, and suddenly there wasn't time. His blue eyes held hers, sincere and vulnerable. I married you hoping that one day you might come to care for me as I already cared for you. But I realize now that I haven't given you reason to. That's not true, Catherine whispered. You've been nothing but kind and considerate. Kindness isn't enough, not for a marriage. Quentin's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. I want more for us, Catherine. I want a real marriage in every sense, but only if you want that too. The intensity of his gaze made her tremble. I don't know what I want, she admitted. This all happened so quickly, but I know I don't regret marrying you, Quentin. A smile touched his lips. That's a start. He raised her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. I won't rush you, but I won't hide my feelings anymore either. You deserve to know that your husband admires you, respects you, and yes, desires you. The word desire sent heat flooding through Catherine's body. No man had ever spoken to her so directly, so honestly about such matters. What if I disappoint you? The question was barely audible. Quentin's expression softened. You could never disappoint me, Catherine. We'll learn together at your pace when you're ready. He rose to his feet, still holding her hands. I'll continue to sleep in the barn for now, but know that when you're ready for me to come home, truly home, I'll be waiting. With that, he leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, then turned and walked out into the night, leaving Catherine breathless and confused, her heart racing with possibilities she hadn't dared to consider. The next morning brought no opportunity for private conversation. One of the horses had escaped its paddock during the night, and Quentin left at dawn to track it down. By mid-morning, dark clouds were gathering on the horizon, promising the first significant rainfall since their marriage. Catherine was preparing lunch when her father called to her weakly from his bedroom. She found him struggling to sit up, his breathing labored and his face ashen. "Papa," she hurried to his side. "What's wrong?" James tried to speak but could only cough, a terrible rattling sound that chilled Catherine to her core. When he finally caught his breath, he clutched her hand. "It's time, Kitty, I can feel it." "No," Catherine shook her head vehemently. "You're just having a bad day." "Let me fix you some tea," and Catherine. Her father's voice was surprisingly firm. "We both knew this was coming. I'm ready." Tears filled her eyes as she realized he was right. The doctor had warned them that the end, when it came, might be sudden. "I'll fetch Dr. Holloway." "There's no time." James squeezed her hand weakly. "Just stay with me and promise me something." "Anything," Catherine whispered, her throat tight with unshed tears. "Let yourself be happy with him." Her father's eyes, so like her own, held a knowing look. "He's a good man, Kitty, better than I dared hope for you." "I will, Papa, I promise." She stroked his thin hair back from his forehead. "He loves you," James said, his voice growing fainter. "Might not say it yet, but a father knows these things." Catherine couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. She simply nodded, holding her father's hand as his breathing grew more labored. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, pattering against the cabin roof. "Your mother's waiting," James murmured, his eyes fixed on something Catherine couldn't see. "She looks so beautiful, just like when I first saw her." A sob escaped Catherine's lips as her father's eyes closed. "Papa, please be happy, my Kitty," he whispered. "I love you." They were the last words James Turner spoke. As the rain fell in earnest outside, Catherine felt her father's hand go limp in hers. He was gone. She sat motionless beside him, tears streaming down her face until the sound of the door opening pulled her from her grief. Quentin stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, his expression changing instantly from triumph to concern when he saw her face. "Catherine." He crossed the room in 3 long strides, kneeling beside her. When he saw James, understanding dawned in his eyes. "Oh, Catherine, I'm so sorry." Something broke inside her then. Catherine collapsed against Quentin's chest, her body shaking with sobs. His arms came around her, strong and secure, holding her together when she felt as though she might shatter. "I wasn't ready," she cried. "I thought we had more time." "I know." Quentin stroked her hair, rocking her gently. "I know, my heart." They stayed that way for a long time until Catherine's tears subsided into quiet hiccups. Finally, Quentin pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "What do you need me to do?" The simple question, so practical yet so tender, steadied her. "We need to prepare him, and someone will have to ride to town for Reverend Maxwell and the undertaker." "I'll go," Quentin said, "but the bridge over Miller's Creek will be washed out with this rain. It might take until morning." Catherine nodded, trying to think clearly through her grief. We should lay him out properly before you go." Together, they washed James's body and dressed him in his Sunday suit. Catherine placed her mother's wedding ring in his pocket. He had carried it with him every day since her death. When they had done all they could, Quentin covered him with a clean sheet and lit candles around the bed. "I'll ride to town now," he said softly. "Will you be all right alone?" Catherine nodded, though her heart raced at the thought. She had never been alone with death before. Quentin seemed to sense her fear. "I don't have to go. We can wait until morning, ride together." "No," Catherine straightened her shoulders. "Papa would want things done properly." "Go now, before the storm worsens." Quentin cupped her face in his hands, his expression solemn. "You are the strongest woman I've ever known, Quentin Adams. I'll be back as soon as I can." As he turned to leave, Catherine caught his hand. "Quentin," she swallowed hard, "thank you for being here." He raised her hand to his lips. "Always, Catherine, always." After Quentin left, Catherine sat in the chair beside her father's body, too numb to cry anymore. Outside, the storm raged, rain lashing against the windows and thunder rumbling across the plains. She must have dozed off eventually because she woke with a start to the sound of the cabin door opening. Quentin stood in the doorway, drenched and exhausted. "The bridge is out," he said, confirming his earlier prediction. "And the ford is too dangerous to cross in this weather." "We'll have to wait until morning." Catherine nodded, grateful that he had returned safely. "You should change into dry clothes before you catch your death." A ghost of a smile touched Quentin's lips at her concern. He disappeared into the main room, returning moments later in dry clothes, his hair still damp from the rain. He brought a blanket with him, which he draped around Catherine's shoulders. "You should rest," he said gently. Catherine shook her head. "I can't leave him alone." "Then I'll sit with you." Quentin pulled the other chair close to hers and sat down. Without a word, he took her hand in his thumb stroking rhythmically across her knuckles. The simple touch was more comforting than any words could have been. "Tell me about him," Quentin said after a while. "What was he like when you were growing up?" The invitation to talk opened a floodgate. Catherine found herself sharing stories of her father's kindness, his quiet strength, the way he had raised her alone after her mother's death when Catherine was just 16. "He taught me to read ledgers before I could read storybooks," she said, smiling through her tears. "Said a woman should know numbers as well as she knows her own name, because men will always try to cheat a woman they think is ignorant." "Smart man," Quentin commented. "He raised a remarkable daughter." "He worried about me," Catherine admitted. "About what would happen to me when he was gone. He was so relieved when we married." Quentin's expression grew serious. "I promised him I would take care of you, that you would never want for anything as long as I lived." "When did you promise him that?" "The night I asked his permission to marry you." Quentin's eyes held hers. "He made me promise something else too." "What was that?" Catherine asked softly. "That I would be honest with you always, even when the truth was difficult." Quentin took a deep breath. "He asked if I loved you. I told him I believed I could, given time. That I already cared for you more than I had any right to, considering how little we had spoken." Catherine's heart thudded against her ribs. And now, the question hung between them, weighted with possibility. Quentin's gaze never wavered. "Now I know with certainty what I only suspected then," he said quietly. "I love you, Catherine. I think perhaps I have since the first time I saw you standing up to Mrs. Abernathy outside the general store, your chin raised and your eyes flashing." The confession stole her breath. "Quentin, you don't need to say anything," he interrupted gently. "This isn't the time or place for such declarations. I just wanted you to know to honor my promise to your father." Catherine looked at her father's still form beneath the sheet, remembering his last words to her. "Let yourself be happy with him. He loves you, he knew," she whispered. "He told me you loved me just before he—" Her voice broke. Quentin squeezed her hand. "Your father was a perceptive man." They sat in silence after that, keeping vigil together as the storm gradually subsided outside. Eventually, Catherine's exhaustion overtook her, and she dozed off with her head on Quentin's shoulder. When she woke, pale morning light was filtering through the curtains, and she was lying on her bed fully clothed with a blanket tucked around her. Quentin must have carried her there. She found him in the kitchen, preparing coffee. He looked as tired as she felt, with dark circles under his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept at all. "The rain stopped," he said, handing her a cup. "I'll ride to town as soon as you're ready. The creek should have subsided enough to cross safely." Catherine nodded, grateful for his quiet competence. "Thank you for staying with me last night, for everything." Quentin's expression softened. "You don't need to thank me, Catherine, not for doing what any husband would do." But that was just it, Catherine thought as she watched him prepare to leave. Not every husband would have been so gentle, so understanding. Not every man would have respected her grief without attempting to diminish it or hurry her through it. In the midst of her sorrow, a new feeling was taking root, a deepening appreciation for the man she had married so hastily, but who was proving to be everything she could have wished for in a partner. James Turner was buried 2 days later in the small cemetery behind the church in Kennewick. The service was well attended, with most of the town turning out to pay their respects to a man who had served the community through his store for over 20 years. Catherine stood beside the grave, Quentin's steady presence at her side, his hand warm at the small of her back as Reverend Maxwell delivered the eulogy. She was grateful for the black mourning dress that Mrs. Peterson had altered for her, for the dignity it provided as she faced the townspeople, many of whom had gossiped so cruelly about her just weeks before. After the service, people came to offer their condolences. Some were sincere, others merely curious to see how the hasty marriage was faring. Catherine accepted their words with quiet grace, drawing strength from Quentin's unwavering support. Mrs. Abernathy was among the last to approach, her expression a mixture of sympathy and calculation. "Such a tragedy, my dear, and so soon after your wedding. One might almost think you rushed to marry before your father passed." Before Catherine could respond, Quentin spoke, his voice carrying just far enough for those nearby to hear. "Mrs. Abernathy, I've always believed that a person's true character shows in how they treat others during times of grief. Catherine and I married because we recognized in each other the qualities we wanted in a life partner. The timing was influenced by her father's illness, yes, but only because James wanted to see his daughter settled before he passed." He fixed the older woman with a steady gaze. "Now, you can continue to spread your unkind speculations, or you can behave with the Christian charity you profess every Sunday. The choice is yours, but be aware that I will not tolerate anyone adding to my wife's burdens during this difficult time." Mrs. Abernathy's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. With a huff, she turned and walked away, her back rigid with indignation. "That might have been unwise," Catherine murmured, though a small part of her thrilled at his defense. "Perhaps," Quentin admitted, "but necessary nonetheless." His expression softened as he looked at her. "Are you ready to go home?" Home. The word carried new weight now. With her father gone, the ranch was truly her only home and Quentin her only family. The realization both terrified and comforted her. "Yes," she said simply, "I'm ready to go home." The weeks following her father's funeral were a time of adjustment for Catherine. The grief came in waves. Sometimes she could go hours without thinking of her father, only to be blindsided by a memory that would leave her gasping for breath. Through it all, Quentin was patient, giving her space when she needed it and comfort when she sought it. Their relationship shifted subtly during this time. Quentin continued to sleep in the barn, but their evenings together grew longer, their conversations deeper. They shared stories of their childhood's Quentin's in Texas, where his father had been a rancher until drought and disease had claimed both the ranch and his parents. Catherine's in Kennewick, where she had grown up helping in the store and dreaming of a wider world. One evening in late October, as the first frost silvered the grass, Catherine was preparing dinner when Quentin came in from the barn, a mysterious smile on his face. "I have something to show you," he said, holding out his hand. Curious, Catherine wiped her hands on her apron and allowed him to lead her outside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Quentin guided her toward the barn, where a small buggy was waiting, hitched to their most gentle mare. "What's this?" Catherine asked, touching the freshly painted wood of the buggy. "I've been working on it in the evenings," Quentin explained. "Bought it from Widow Jensen when I was in town last week. It needed repairs, but I thought—" He hesitated, suddenly looking uncertain. "I thought you might like to go into town sometimes, visit your father's grave, or just get away from the ranch for a while." Catherine was touched by his thoughtfulness. Since her father's death, she had rarely left the property, finding comfort in the routine of ranch work. But Quentin had recognized her need for connection, for moments beyond their isolation. "It's perfect," she said softly, running her hand along the polished seat. "Thank you, Quentin." His smile warmed her more than the approaching autumn sunset. "Would you like to try it now?" "There's still enough light for a short ride." Catherine hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Let me get my shawl." The evening air was crisp as they set out, following the winding trail that led through their property. Quentin handled the reins with easy confidence, pointing out improvements he planned for the land where he would expand the grazing area, where he hoped to build a larger house someday. "A larger house?" Catherine asked, a flutter of something like hope in her chest. Quentin glanced at her, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she rarely saw. "I hoped eventually we might need more room." The implication was clear, and Catherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. "For children, you mean?" "Yes." Quentin's voice was soft. "If you wanted that, with me—" Catherine stared at her hands folded in her lap. "I've thought about it," she admitted. "Children, a family." "And," Quentin prompted gently. She looked up at him, studying his face in the fading light, the strong line of his jaw, the kindness in his eyes, the way his mouth curved into a smile that seemed reserved only for her. In the months since their marriage, he had proven himself to be everything he had promised and more. "I want that," she whispered. "A family, with you." Quentin's hands tightened on the reins, and for a moment Catherine thought he might stop the buggy. Instead, he exhaled slowly, his voice husky when he spoke. "Catherine, are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm ready, Quentin." She gathered her courage, placing her hand on his arm, "for our marriage to be real, in every way." The look he gave her then was so full of love and longing that Catherine's breath caught in her throat. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the sound of the horse's hooves. "Because I don't want you to feel obligated or rushed. I'm certain." Catherine's heart raced, but her voice was steady. "I've spent my life being cautious, Quentin, doing what was expected, what was proper. For once, I want to follow my heart." Quentin guided the buggy to a stop beneath a stand of cottonwood trees. In the distance, the lights of their cabin glowed warmly against the darkening sky. He turned to face her, taking her hands in his. "I've loved you for so long," he confessed. "Even before I knew you, I think I was waiting for you." Catherine reached up to touch his face, tracing the line of his cheekbone with her fingertips. "I didn't know it was possible to feel this way," she whispered. "To start a marriage as a practical arrangement and discover it's the most impractical, wonderful thing that's ever happened to me." Quentin leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers. "May I kiss you, Catherine?" Not as a formality or a gesture, but as a husband who loves his wife with his whole heart. In answer, Catherine closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as Quentin's arms came around her, drawing her closer. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "Take me home, Quentin," Catherine whispered against his lips. The ride back to the cabin seemed endless, charged with anticipation and newfound intimacy. When they arrived, Quentin helped Catherine down from the buggy, his touch lingering. By unspoken agreement, he saw to the horse while she went inside to prepare for bed. Catherine's hands trembled as she unpinned her hair, letting it fall in waves down her back. She changed into her nightgown, the simple white cotton suddenly seeming inadequate for such a momentous night. But when Quentin entered the cabin, his gaze as he looked at her left no doubt that he found her beautiful. He crossed the room slowly, stopping before her. "Catherine," he breathed, her name a prayer on his lips. She reached for him, and he gathered her into his arms, his kiss deeper and more urgent than before. Catherine felt herself melting against him, all the loneliness and sorrow of the past months giving way to something warm and bright and hopeful. That night, Quentin Adams slept in the cabin for the first time since their marriage, his wife nestled in his arms, their hearts beating in time with each other. And if the gossips of Kennewick had anything to say about the hasty marriage of Catherine Turner to the handsome cowboy Quentin Adams, neither of them cared to listen. They were too busy living the truth of their love, writing their own story with each passing day. Spring arrived in Kennewick with a riot of wildflowers and the sweet scent of renewal. The Adams Ranch had weathered its first winter well. With Quentin's careful planning and Catherine's resourcefulness, ensuring that their small herd of cattle had sufficient food and shelter during the harshest months. As April turned to May, Catherine stood on the porch of their cabin no longer quite so modest, as Quentin had added a proper kitchen and expanded their bedroom during the winter months, watching her husband work with a young colt in the corral. 6 months had passed since the night she had invited him into their home, into her heart, and Catherine marveled at how completely her life had changed. "Quentin," she called, her hand resting lightly on her stomach, which was just beginning to show the first signs of their coming child. "Lunch is ready." He looked up, his face breaking into the smile that still made her heart skip a beat. With a final pat to the colt's neck, he secured the gate and strode toward the house, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're supposed to be resting," he chided gently as he reached the porch, pulling her into his arms. Catherine laughed, nestling against his chest. "I'm pregnant, not invalid. Besides, Dr. Holloway said light activity is good for me." Quentin's hand covered hers where it rested on her belly. "I'm not sure Dr. Holloway would consider your definition of light activity to be the same as his." It was true that Catherine had refused to significantly reduce her workload, despite Quentin's concerns. She had compromised by avoiding the heavier tasks around the ranch, but still insisted on cooking, keeping the house, and helping with the accounts. "I'll rest more when I need to," she promised, leaning up to kiss him lightly. "For now, I'm perfectly well and perfectly happy." Quentin's expression softened, his blue eyes warm with love. "Are you happy? I mean, completely." Catherine took his hand, leading him into the house where a simple meal awaited them. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible." Quentin seated her at the table before taking his own place. "Though I'd be happier if you'd agree to let me hire some help before the baby comes." They had discussed this before. Quentin wanted to bring in one of the Reynolds ranch hands, a young man named Ethan who was looking for a place of his own, to help with the expanding herd and the daily work of the ranch. Catherine had resisted, concerned about their finances. "We can afford it now," Quentin assured her, reading her thoughts. "The cattle sale last month brought in more than expected, and I've got a line on some good breeding stock that will improve our herd significantly next year." Catherine considered his words as she served the stew she had prepared. "It's not just the money," she admitted. "I worry about bringing a stranger into our home, changing what we have here." Quentin reached across the table to take her hand. "Nothing could change what we have, Catherine, but having help would mean more time for us, for our family." His gaze dropped to her stomach. "For our child." Put that way, Catherine found her resistance weakening. "You're sure about this, Ethan? He's hardworking, honest, and keeps to himself." Quentin squeezed her hand. "He could take the room in the barn, so he wouldn't even be in the house. And it would ease my mind to know someone was here if I needed to ride into town or check the far pastures." "All right," Catherine agreed finally. "If you're sure we can afford it." Quentin's smile was radiant. "I'm sure, and thank you." As they ate, they discussed their plans for the coming months: the addition of a nursery to the cabin, the possibility of expanding their garden, the supplies they would need before winter came again. It was a conversation like many they had shared over the past year, practical and forward-looking, but underscored by a deep current of love and partnership that had grown stronger with each passing day. After lunch, Quentin returned to his work with the colt, and Catherine settled in the chair on the porch with her mending. As she sewed, her thoughts drifted to the journey that had brought her here from a desperate young woman fleeing gossip to a wife, and soon to be mother, secure in her husband's love and their shared future. The sound of approaching horses drew her attention. Looking up, she was surprised to see Sheriff Donovan and Mrs. Abernathy riding toward the cabin. An unexpected visit from either would have been unusual. Together, they presented a perplexing sight. Quentin must have noticed them too, for he secured the colt and strode to the porch, arriving at Catherine's side just as the visitors reached the yard. "Sheriff, Mrs. Abernathy," he greeted them, his tone neutral but cautious. "This is an unexpected pleasure, Mrs. Abernathy sniffed, her gaze sweeping over Catherine's slightly rounded figure with undisguised interest. "Mrs. Adams, you're looking—" "Well, thank you," Catherine replied, rising to her feet with as much dignity as she could muster. "Would you care for some refreshment after your ride?" "That's very kind, but this isn't a social call," Sheriff Donovan said, removing his hat. "May we speak inside?" Quentin and Catherine exchanged a glance before Quentin nodded, gesturing toward the door. "Of course. Please come in." Once seated at the kitchen table with cups of coffee before them that neither visitor had touched, the sheriff cleared his throat awkwardly. "Mrs. Abernathy has brought a rather serious allegation to my attention," he began. "Given the nature of it, I felt it was my duty to investigate." "What allegation?" Quentin's voice was calm, but Catherine could see the tension in his shoulders. Mrs. Abernathy leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with self-righteousness. "I have reason to believe that your marriage is not legitimate. That it was entered into under false pretenses, possibly to cover up improper behavior." Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. "That's absurd," she whispered. "Is it?" Mrs. Abernathy arched an eyebrow. "You married with unusual haste, just as rumors about you and that traveling salesman were circulating. Now, less than a year later, you're in a family way." She glanced pointedly at Catherine's stomach. "The timing is suggestive." Quentin's hand found Catherine's beneath the table, squeezing gently. "Mrs. Abernathy, your insinuations are not only incorrect but deeply offensive. Sheriff, I'm surprised you would lend credibility to such baseless gossip by bringing it to our home." Sheriff Donovan had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I understand your frustration, Adams, but when accusations of this nature are made, I have a duty to look into them." "Accusations of what nature exactly?" Catherine demanded, finding her voice at last. "That I married my husband because I loved him. That we are expecting a child as married couples often do. Where is the crime in that? The crime would be if the child you carry was conceived before your marriage, and with another man," Mrs. Abernathy said bluntly. "If you misled Mr. Adams into marriage to provide legitimacy for another man's child, that would constitute fraud." The accusation hung in the air, so outrageous that for a moment, neither Catherine nor Quentin could respond. Then Quentin stood, his chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor. "Sheriff, I respect your position and your duty, but I will not sit here and allow my wife to be insulted in our own home." His voice was controlled but vibrating with anger. "Catherine and I were married in the church with her father's blessing. Our child was conceived within that marriage, and anyone who suggests otherwise is either misinformed or malicious." He turned to Mrs. Abernathy, his expression hard. "I'm curious, Mrs. Abernathy, about your sudden concern for my welfare. If you truly believed Catherine had deceived me, why wait until now to bring these allegations forward? Why not speak up months ago?" The older woman shifted uncomfortably. I needed to be certain. When I saw Mrs. Adams's condition becoming evident, I felt I could no longer remain silent." "I see." Quentin's voice was dangerously quiet. "So you waited until my wife was carrying our child in a vulnerable state to launch this attack on her character. Tell me, does that strike you as the action of a Christian woman?" Mrs. Abernathy flushed an ugly red. "How dare you question my Christian charity? I came here out of concern, you came here out of spite," Catherine interrupted, rising to stand beside her husband. "You've disapproved of me since I was a girl, Mrs. Abernathy. Nothing I did was ever good enough, modest enough, proper enough for your standards. When I married Quentin, you were furious that your predictions of my ruin didn't come to pass, so you've invented this new scandal to try to destroy my happiness." "That's not, it is," Catherine insisted, her voice steady despite the trembling in her limbs. "And I won't allow it, not anymore." She turned to the sheriff. "If you have any official questions about the legitimacy of our marriage, you can direct them to Reverend Maxwell, who performed the ceremony. If not, I must ask you both to leave. This upset isn't good for the baby." Sheriff Donovan stood, placing his hat back on his head. "That won't be necessary, Mrs. Adams. I apologize for the intrusion. Mrs. Abernathy, I believe we've taken enough of the Adamses' time." The older woman looked as though she might argue, but something in the sheriff's expression silenced her. She rose stiffly, her mouth a thin line of displeasure. "This isn't the end of this matter," she warned as she moved toward the door. "The truth has a way of coming out." "Yes, it does," Quentin agreed, his arm firmly around Catherine's waist. "And the truth is that my wife and I love each other deeply, are expecting our first child in the fall, and would appreciate being left to our privacy." "Good day, Mrs. Abernathy. Sheriff." After they had gone, Catherine sagged against Quentin, suddenly exhausted. "I can't believe she would go so far," she whispered, "to suggest that our child—" "SHH." Quentin led her to their bedroom, helping her lie down on the bed. "Don't think about it. She's a bitter, unhappy woman who can't stand to see others find the joy that's eluded her." Catherine closed her eyes, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. "Will it never end? The gossip, the suspicion?" Quentin stretched out beside her, pulling her close. "It will. When our child is born healthy and strong, when our ranch prospers, when year after year passes with us still together and still in love eventually, even the most determined gossip will run out of venom." "And if they don't?" Catherine murmured, nestling into his embrace. Quentin pressed a kiss to her temple. "Then we'll continue to live our truth, not their lies. Remember what I told you the day I proposed. Let them talk. Words don't build ranches or homes or families. Actions do." Catherine smiled, feeling the tension begin to drain from her body. "You were very wise for a man proposing a marriage of convenience." "It was never just convenience for me," Quentin admitted, his hand joining hers over their growing child. "Even then I hoped for more. And now," Catherine turned her face to his, "now I have everything I never dared dream of." Quentin's kiss was gentle, reverent. "And no amount of gossip can take that away from us." As Catherine drifted off to sleep, secure in her husband's arms, she reflected that Quentin had been right all along. Let them talk. The truth of their love spoke louder than any whispers ever could. The summer passed in a blur of activity as Quentin and Catherine prepared for the birth of their child. Ethan, the young ranch hand Quentin had hired, proved to be a valuable addition to their household, quiet and hardworking. He took on much of the physical labor that Catherine could no longer manage as her pregnancy advanced. By August, Catherine's belly was round and prominent, and she found herself moving more slowly in the summer heat. Quentin insisted on adding more comforts to their home: a proper rocking chair for the porch, a softer mattress for their bed, even a small icebox that Ethan helped him transport from town. "You're spoiling me," Catherine protested one evening as Quentin massaged her swollen feet. "I'm taking care of my wife and child," he corrected with a smile, "as is my right and privilege." Despite Mrs. Abernathy's threats, no further accusations had been leveled against them. Sheriff Donovan had even stopped by the ranch a week after the confrontation to offer a more formal apology, explaining that he had felt obligated to investigate but had never put much stock in the allegations. "Some folks just can't bear to see others happy," he'd said gruffly. "Pay them no mind." It was easier said than done, but as Catherine's due date approached, she found less energy to spare for worrying about town gossip. Her world had narrowed to the ranch, to Quentin, to the child growing within her. On a sweltering day in early September, Catherine was shelling peas on the porch when the first pain gripped her. She gasped, dropping the bowl, peas scattering across the wooden planks. "Quentin," she called, her voice strangled with shock and fear. He was working in the corral with Ethan but looked up at her cry, immediately vaulting over the fence and running toward the house. "Catherine, what is it?" "The baby," she managed, gripping the arms of the rocking chair as another pain washed over her. "I think it's time." Quentin's face paled beneath his tan. "Are you sure? It's not supposed to be for another 2 weeks." "I'm sure," Catherine gasped. "We need to send for Dr. Holloway." Quentin turned to Ethan, who had followed him to the porch. Ride to town fast as you can, bring the doctor back here." The young man nodded, already running toward the barn. Within minutes they heard him galloping away, pushing his horse to its limits. Quentin helped Catherine into the house and onto their bed, his hands gentle but trembling slightly. "What do you need? What can I do?" Despite her pain, Catherine couldn't help but smile at the panic in his eyes. "First, take a deep breath. The baby isn't coming this minute. We have time." Quentin did as she instructed, visibly calming himself. "All right, what next?" "We need clean water, towels, and the basket of baby things I prepared." Catherine winced as another contraction began. "And then I just need you to be with me until the doctor arrives." The hours that followed were a blur of pain, fear, and determination. Doctor. Holloway arrived just as the sun was setting, looking disheveled from his hasty journey but reassuringly calm. "First babies often take their time," he told them after examining Catherine, "but everything looks to be progressing normally." Quentin refused to leave Catherine's side, holding her hand through each contraction, wiping her brow with a cool cloth, murmuring encouragement when the pain became almost unbearable. As night fell, the labor intensified and Catherine found herself drawing on reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. "I can't do this," she cried as a particularly vicious contraction tore through her. "Quentin, I can't." "You can," he assured her, his voice steady even as his eyes betrayed his concern. "You're the strongest person I know, Quentin Adams. Our child is lucky to have you as a mother." His faith in her gave Catherine the courage to continue. As midnight approached, Dr. Holloway announced that it was time to push. The next half hour was the most excruciating of Catherine's life, but also, somehow, the most transcendent. With one final, tremendous effort, she felt her child slip from her body, and then the room was filled with the indignant wail of a newborn. "A boy," Dr. Holloway announced, a rare smile breaking through his professional demeanor. "A fine, healthy boy." Catherine collapsed against the pillows, exhausted beyond words but desperate to see her child. Quentin's face was wet with tears as he watched the doctor clean and swaddle their son. "A boy," he repeated in wonder. "Catherine, we have a son." When the doctor placed the tiny bundle in her arms, Catherine felt her heart expand in a way she had never imagined possible. The baby's face was red and wrinkled, his head covered in dark fuzz that promised hair like his father's. As she gazed at him, he opened his eyes blue and unfocused, but so perfect that Catherine felt tears spill down her cheeks. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Quentin perched on the edge of the bed, one arm around Catherine, the other hand reaching to gently touch his son's cheek. "He's perfect," he breathed. "Absolutely perfect, doctor." Holloway finished his work efficiently, ensuring that Catherine was comfortable and giving instructions for her care over the coming days. "What will you name him?" he asked as he prepared to leave, dawn now breaking outside the window. Catherine and Quentin exchanged a glance. They had discussed names but hadn't settled on one, waiting to meet their child first. "James," Quentin said softly. "James Quentin Adams." Catherine's eyes filled with fresh tears. "After my father," Quentin nodded. "A good man who raised an extraordinary daughter. I hope our son inherits her strength and courage." "And his father's kindness and integrity," Catherine added, leaning against Quentin's shoulder as they both gazed at their newborn son. After the doctor left, promising to return the next day, Quentin helped Catherine change into a clean nightgown while Ethan, who had waited anxiously outside during the birth, prepared a light meal for the new parents. "I can't believe he's really here," Catherine marveled as she nursed James for the first time, the sensation strange but wonderfully intimate. "After all this time, all our planning and preparing, he's actually here." Quentin watched them, his expression one of awe and profound love. "When I rode into Kennewick a year ago, I never imagined this is where I'd end up," he confessed. "I was just looking for work, a place to save money for my own ranch someday. I had no idea I was riding toward my future, my family. And when you proposed to me on that porch, did you imagine this?" Catherine asked, gesturing to their son, their home, the life they had built together. I hoped, Quentin said simply. I hoped, but I didn't dare expect it. You were so far above me, Catherine, educated, refined, the daughter of a respected businessman. I was just a cowboy with dirt under his nails and dreams bigger than his pockets. Catherine shook her head, reaching for his hand. You were never just anything, Quentin Adams. You were exactly what I needed, even when I was too blind or too scared to see it. As James drifted to sleep at his mother's breast, Quentin carefully lifted him, cradling him with a tenderness that made Catherine's heart ache with love. I'll never let anyone hurt you, he promised the sleeping infant. Either of you, no matter what it takes. Catherine knew he was thinking of Mrs. Abernathy, of the gossip that had swirled around them and might still follow their child. We'll protect him together, she said. And we'll teach him that what matters isn't what others say about you, but who you truly are. Like his mother taught me, Quentin said with a smile, placing James in the cradle he had crafted by hand during the long winter evenings. As the new family settled into their first morning together, Catherine felt a peace that transcended her physical exhaustion. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and there would surely be many, they would face them together, their bond strengthened by the tiny miracle sleeping peacefully beside them. Word of James's birth spread quickly through Kennewick. In the days that followed, visitors began to arrive at the Adams Ranch, bringing gifts and good wishes. Most were genuinely warm in their congratulations, seeming to have forgotten or dismissed the gossip that had once surrounded Catherine and Quentin's hasty marriage, even Mrs. Abernathy made an appearance, though she remained in her buggy at the edge of the property, sending her young companion to deliver a small package containing a hand-knitted blanket. The gift came without a note, but Catherine recognized it as an olive branch of sorts, perhaps the closest thing to an apology the proud woman could offer. Should I send it back? Catherine asked Quentin as they examined the delicate blanket, which was truly beautiful despite its source. Quentin considered for a moment, then shook his head. No, let it be a reminder that even the hardest hearts can soften. Besides, it would be a shame to deprive James of such fine workmanship because of adult disagreements. As autumn painted the Wyoming landscape in gold and crimson, Catherine recovered her strength, and little James thrived. He was a contented baby for the most part, his moments of fussiness easily soothed by his father's deep voice or his mother's gentle rocking. Catherine found motherhood both more exhausting and more fulfilling than she had anticipated. While Quentin approached fatherhood with the same thoughtful dedication he brought to everything else in his life. One crisp October morning, Catherine bundled James against the chill and joined Quentin on the porch, where he was reviewing plans for the expansion of their home. You think we're being overly ambitious? She asked, settling into her rocking chair with James nestled against her chest. Adding 2 rooms is a significant undertaking before winter. Quentin looked up from his drawings, his expression thoughtful. Perhaps, but with Ethan's help and if the weather holds, we could have the walls up and the roof on within a month. The interior work can be done during the winter months. He gestured to the plans spread across the small table. One room will be a proper bedroom for James, and the other will be a parlor where you can receive guests without having to use the kitchen table. Catherine smiled at his consideration. You've thought of everything. Not quite everything. Quentin hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small leather pouch. I've been saving for this since before James was born. Curious, Catherine accepted the pouch, opening it to find a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond. Quentin. I know we're already married, he said, a flush rising to his cheeks, but when we wed, I couldn't afford to give you a proper ring. It's always bothered me. Oh, Quentin, Catherine's eyes filled with tears. I never needed a ring to know your commitment, I know. But I wanted you to have this all the same. He took the ring from the pouch and slid it onto her finger, where it nestled perfectly alongside her simple gold wedding band. Consider it a promise for our future, the one we're building together day by day. Catherine admired the way the diamond caught the morning light, but it was the thought behind the gift that truly moved her. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you." "There's something else," Quentin said, his expression growing serious. "I received a letter yesterday from a cattle broker in Cheyenne. He's impressed with the quality of our small herd and wants to discuss a partnership for next season. It would mean a significant investment, but also the potential for substantial growth." "That's wonderful news," Catherine exclaimed. "Your hard work is being recognized." "Our hard work," Quentin corrected. "And there's more. The broker mentioned that Mr. Hopkins, the silk merchant who was in Kennewick last year, remembered you and asked after you." Catherine stilled, surprised to hear that name again. "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That you're my wife, the mother of my son, and the best partner a man could ask for." Quentin took her free hand, the one not cradling James. "But it got me thinking about something you said when we first met, about Mr. Hopkins offering you a position in his shop." "That was a lifetime ago," Catherine murmured, "before everything changed." "Before us," Quentin agreed. "But I've never asked you if you regret not taking that opportunity, if you ever wish you'd had the chance to use your business skills beyond our ranch accounts." The question surprised Catherine. Most husbands would never think to ask such a thing, assuming that marriage and motherhood were fulfillment enough for any woman. But Quentin had always seen her more clearly than others, had always respected her mind as well as her heart. "Sometimes I wonder what that life might have been like," she admitted. "But I've never regretted the choice I made. This," she gestured to their home, to James, to Quentin himself, "is more than I ever dared hope for." Quentin's expression softened. "I'm glad. But I've been thinking that perhaps there's a way for you to have both." "What do you mean?" Catherine asked. "Kennewick has grown since you left the general store. With the railroad spur coming next year, it's likely to grow even more. But there's no dedicated dry goods store for women's needs fabrics, notions, the finer things that the general store doesn't carry." Quentin's eyes held hers. "You have the knowledge and the experience to run such a shop. And with Ethan handling more of the ranch work, you might have the time, not now perhaps, but when James is a bit older." Catherine stared at him, astonished by the suggestion. "You'd want me to open a shop in town, if it would make you happy, yes?" Quentin squeezed her hand. "You've given up so much to build this life with me, Catherine. Your home in town, your independence, your connection to the community. I want to give something back to you if I can." Tears pricked at Catherine's eyes. "I haven't given up anything that matters," she assured him. "But the idea of a shop, it's intriguing." She glanced down at James, now sleeping peacefully against her. "But what about our son, our home? We'd work it out together, as we always do." Quentin's voice was confident. "Perhaps the shop would only be open certain days or for limited hours. James could be with you some of the time, with me others. And it would mean more regular trips to town, more connection with others beyond our little world here." Catherine considered the possibility, feeling a flutter of excitement at the thought of building something new, something that was entirely her own yet still connected to the life she shared with Quentin and James. "I'd need to think about it," she said finally. "Plan carefully. It would be a significant investment." "Of course." Quentin's smile was warm with understanding. "There's no rush. I just wanted you to know that I support whatever you choose." In that moment, looking at her husband's sincere expression, Catherine felt a wave of love so powerful it nearly took her breath away. This was the man who had married her to quiet gossip, but had never once tried to silence her own voice. Who saw her not as an extension of himself, but as a full partner, with dreams and ambitions worthy of support. "I love you," she said simply, leaning forward to kiss him, James cradled between them. "More than I ever thought possible." "And I love you," Quentin replied, his voice husky with emotion. "From the moment I saw you standing on that porch, facing down the town's gossip with your chin high and your eyes flashing. I knew then that you were someone special, Catherine Turner. I just never dreamed you'd become Quentin Adams, my wife, the mother of my child, the center of my world." As they sat together on the porch of their home, the future stretching before them bright with possibility, Catherine reflected on the strange, winding path that had brought them here. A hasty marriage proposed to silence gossip had transformed into a love deeper and truer than fairy tales. She had married him to keep the town's gossip quiet, but Quentin had been right all along when he'd said, "Let them talk." Words didn't build homes or families or futures. Love did. And love, Catherine knew with absolute certainty, was what would sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead. 5 years later, Catherine stood in the doorway of Kennewick's finest dry goods store Adams Mercantile watching as Quentin helped 4-year-old Emma try on a new bonnet while James, now 5, solemnly counted inventory on the lower shelves, his small face a picture of concentration. The shop had been open for 2 years and had quickly become a success, drawing customers from as far as Cheyenne with its quality goods and fair prices. Catherine managed it 3 days a week, while a capable young woman named Sarah handled the other days. The arrangement allowed Catherine to balance her work with her family responsibilities, and the income from the store had helped fund the continued expansion of the Adams Ranch, which now boasted one of the finest herds in the territory. As she watched her family, Catherine's hand drifted to her stomach, where a third child was just beginning to make its presence known. They hadn't told the children yet, wanting to wait until she was further along, but Quentin's knowing glances and tender care suggested he already suspected. "Mrs. Adams?" Mrs. Abernathy's voice broke into Catherine's reverie. The older woman had become, if not exactly a friend, then at least a regular customer who treated Catherine with grudging respect. "I must say, those lace collars you ordered from Philadelphia are exquisite. I'll take 3. "I'm glad you approve," Catherine replied with a genuine smile. "They arrived just yesterday." As Catherine wrapped the purchase, Mrs. Abernathy leaned closer, her voice dropping confidentially. "I hear Mrs. Reynolds is in quite a state. Her son is determined to marry that Nilsson girl from the Swedish settlement, despite the gossip about her family's financial troubles." Catherine's hand stilled momentarily on the paper. "Is that so? Indeed." Mrs. Abernathy nodded sagely. "A most unsuitable match by all accounts. The poor boy is throwing his future away on a pretty face and a sad story." Catherine thought of young Thomas Reynolds, a kind and hard-working young man of 20, and the lovely Anna Nilsson, whose family had fallen on hard times after her father's injury in a mining accident. She had seen them together at church, the way they looked at each other reminding her powerfully of how Quentin sometimes looked at her. "Perhaps," Catherine said carefully, "he sees something in her that others have missed, value that can't be measured in dollars or social standing, Mrs. Abernathy's eyes narrowed. "You would say that, I suppose, given your own, unconventional beginning." "Yes, I would." Catherine handed over the wrapped package, her gaze steady. "And I would add that my unconventional beginning has led to a happiness I might never have found had I listened to the town's gossip instead of my heart." The older woman pursed her lips, but seemed to consider Catherine's words. "Well, I suppose time will tell, as it did in your case." "Indeed it will," Catherine smiled as Quentin approached, Emma perched on his shoulders and James at his side. "Time has a way of revealing what truly matters." As Mrs. Abernathy departed with a sniff, Quentin raised an eyebrow. "More words of wisdom from our town's self-appointed moral guardian." "Something like that." Catherine accepted a kiss from her husband, then reached to take Emma from his shoulders. "She was telling me about Thomas Reynolds and Anna Nilsson. Apparently the town disapproves." Understanding dawned in Quentin's eyes. "Ah, history repeating itself, perhaps." Catherine stroked Emma's dark curls so like her own, though hopefully with less drama than our case. "I don't know," Quentin mused, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "A little drama adds spice to a love story, wouldn't you say?" Catherine laughed, the sound drawing smiles from both children. "I think we've had enough spice to last a lifetime, Mr. Adams." "Never enough," Quentin murmured, his hand finding hers as James tugged at his sleeve. eager to show his father his careful inventory work. As they moved through the store together, a family united by love that had grown from the most unexpected beginnings, Catherine felt a profound gratitude for the twists of fate that had brought them here. The gossip that had once threatened to define her had instead led her to define herself as a wife, a mother, a businesswoman, a partner in the truest sense of the word. That evening, after the children were asleep in the comfortable house they had built adjacent to the original cabin, now used as Ethan's home, the young man having become like family over the years, Catherine and Quentin sat on their porch, watching as the first stars appeared in the Wyoming sky. "I was thinking about what Mrs. Abernathy said today," Catherine said, her head resting on Quentin's shoulder. "About Thomas and Anna. Quentin's arm tightened around her. "I thought perhaps we should invite them to dinner, both families. Give them a chance to see that sometimes the most unlikely beginnings lead to the happiest endings." Quentin turned to look at her, his expression warm with pride and love. "Mrs. Adams, are you suggesting we use our respectability to influence the town's gossip?" "Perhaps," Catherine smiled. "Or perhaps I'm just remembering a very wise cowboy who once told a desperate young woman, 'Let them talk.'" "Sounds like a smart fellow," Quentin said, his hand drifting to rest on her stomach where their third child grew. "Was he handsome too?" "Devastatingly so," Catherine assured him, leaning in for a kiss that, even after 6 years of marriage, still made her heart race. "And he still is." As the stars multiplied overhead, Quentin Adams reflected that some things were too precious, too perfect to be expressed in words. The love she and Quentin had built together, the family they had created, the life they shared, these were the truths that no amount of gossip could ever diminish. And in the end, that was all that mattered.